Hey, it's your girl Deya Direct, and today we're talking about help wanted. Why asking for help makes you strong. Let me ask you a question. Why is asking for help so hard? What if you discovered that asking for help is actually a sign of strength and not weakness? Would you ask more often? If so, who would you ask? And what would you ask for? I want you to keep that in mind during today's podcast. I'm going to talk to you about some things that I discovered about asking for help. Plus, in our Deya Direct section, we're talking to my friends at Providence St. Joseph Health Hospital about the challenges we have when it comes to asking for help. So stay tuned, because today we're finally going to get the help that so many of us need. Did you know that there's actually power in asking for help? Why is asking for help so hard? Is it pride? Is it ego? Is it fear? Fear of rejection? What is it? When I started exploring this topic, I put up a Facebook post asking why it was so hard for people to ask for help. Nikki said, "Help, period, sounds easy, but it's very hard for me to ask for assistance without feeling vulnerable or obligated." I understand that one, Nikki. Been there. Still there, depending on which day you catch me. And it was in preparation for the conversation with the folks over at Providence St. Joseph Health, which you'll hear soon. But the question was, what was hardest for you to ask for? Stephanie said, "Oh my God, to ask my son and his wife to live with them after I was laid off. I felt less than a zero." Yeah, I know that was hard, Stephanie. That's the tricky part, because I know Stephanie, and I know she has a heart of gold, and that, like many of us, she would do it for them without question if the shoe were on the other foot. But the idea that somebody would actually extend the same grace to you that you extend to them, or would extend to them, but then when it's your turn, you can't receive it. What is that about? Gwen Chambers said, "It was hard to ask my parents for help when running into financial issues when she was younger and starting out on her own." She also said it was hard to accept help from friends when she had surgery and wasn't able to do things as normal. Ooh, yeah. Being on your back, financially or physically, does make you feel vulnerable. And again, knowing that she has a heart of gold, I know good and well she would do it for those same people, but hard to receive. What's yours? I got one more. Anne Marie said, "The idea of being included in events around holidays." She's single, her kids are grown, and she said that going out places or being stuck inside due to weather is no fun. It's hard to invite yourself to someone else's family gathering when you have nothing to do. My response to her was, you should consider creating an event for the very thing that you want. Oftentimes the areas where we're challenged or feel vulnerable or feel like there isn't enough of something or enough access to it, in those moments of vulnerability, that's usually a charge for us to become the answer where there's a lack or need. So where there's a need, it might be an opportunity for you to lead. So I've got some good news for you, because there's been a lot of research done around asking for help. And the good news is that researchers and psychologists have said that people underestimate the odds that others will help us. Psychologist Heidi Grant says, "From strangers to colleagues to friends, we think people are likely to reject our request, which of course leads to people not asking for help as much as we should." So she says that many people need help and are afraid to ask. Some of the top reasons we don't ask for help are fear of rejection, pride, ego, low self-esteem, afraid that others will use our need against us, especially at work. No matter which way you get around to it, people don't ask for help because people are afraid. And we know that fear is crippling, and it keeps us away from our best. So whether it's fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear that somebody's going to ask you, or fear that somebody's going to use your weakness against you, it's all based in fear. But research also shows that people who have rejected you in the past, now this one really threw me off. They say that it's been proven that people who have rejected you in the past actually are more likely to help you than other people who you didn't ask before. Because when they reject you, it's like offering them an opportunity to help. And so they jump at it because they want to feel better about how they treated you before. They actually want to repair the relationship. So apparently it's a big untapped resource that a lot of people have, because guess what? If I ask for something and you reject me because of that rejection and how it made me feel, I'm probably not going to ask again. But as it turns out, asking again actually increases your chances for people to tell you yes because of how saying no and rejecting you made them feel. So on one hand, while we're less likely to ask for help, on that note, another obstacle is that we think people will think less of us. But in fact, evidence suggests that people actually like us more for asking for help. The idea is if I help you psychologically, I want to like you. So we should not worry about people thinking less of us. We should be thinking about it as a positive. That's crazy, right? Did you catch that? Rewind and listen again. I'm going to give you 5 reasons why asking for help is a sign of strength and self-awareness. Point number 1. When you ask for help, you create the way. Just because you don't see people asking for help doesn't mean they don't want to. So by modeling your own openness and acceptance to asking for and receiving help, you help create an environment for others to do the same. Now, I know this to be true because when I was putting together the Super Self-Care Power Summit, it was so hard for me to ask for help, but it was such a large undertaking. There was no way possible that I could service the people that I was inviting, all that needed to be done, and to have it done well if I did it by myself. Even if in our heads we can do it or we know how to do it, we often just don't have the mental or emotional capacity or time to do everything. And so in the interest of the greater good, in the interest of self-care and saving yourself, because I'm telling you, there were days where I just had mental overload. So many boxes to check, so many tasks to get done, so little time to get it done in, so much money to put out, just so much. You only have so much resource within yourself. There's a point where you have to say, okay, if I do this, then I need somebody else to do that. And what I found was by asking for help, number 1, it got easier for me to do. Number 2, the people who I asked for help felt more comfortable asking me for help in turn. And of course, I was happy to oblige. I am a big believer in creating the atmosphere that you want. The second way asking for help can be a sign of strength and self-awareness is if you ask in your own way. First, you have to be clear about what it is that you want. You won't get what you want if you don't ask for it. And you're certainly not going to ask for it unless you feel comfortable doing it. So, what's stopping you? Probably how asking for help makes you feel. One way to combat that is by articulating your needs in a way that feels like you. For instance, if the thought of approaching someone to ask for help makes you feel uncomfortable, then don't frame it that way. Instead, ask if you can get their input, bounce some ideas around, or get their perspective. In this way, you'll set the tone for a fruitful collaboration and reduce the likelihood of feeling insecure or vulnerable. The third way to ask for help from a position of strength and self-awareness is making asking a habit. Usually, the more you do something, the better you become at it. Don't I know that to be true? Just like some of my Facebook friends, just the idea of asking for help made me sick and ill and nervous. I was just totally uncomfortable with the concept. I knew this was an area of growth for me. I knew it was something that I was going to have to get better at. And little by little, I would begin to ask for help. I would begin to even tell people that my self-care challenge to myself was learning how to ask for help, simply for self-preservation, right? You can't do everything. You can't be everywhere. And even if you can't do it all the time and in every instance. So you've got to find other ways to get things done. And so I remember having a conversation with a girlfriend who's a producer. She's got several businesses. They're all doing really, really well. And I asked her one day, I said, how do you get it all done? And she said, I ask for help. In fact, when she produced her first movie, she didn't know anything about producing a movie. And so she would just call people. And she said, you'd be surprised that if you are just honest and tell people what you need and you show that you're tenacious and that you're really interested and that you're open to their perspective, people are happy to help you. And I was like, I can't believe it. She was like, oh yeah. How do you think I've gotten as far as I've gotten? I will call people, strangers, people who are expert in their fields, and I'll say, hey, listen, this is what I'm trying to do. Can you help me? How did you do this? How did you do that? That's so bold. And it's so smart. And you know what she got? She got help. So I guess the question for us becomes too, what do you want more? Do you want to be the Lone Ranger? Do you want to be the person who does everything, who nobody thinks needs any help, and you're exhausted? Maybe even resentful because nobody's helping you? Or are you going to take the risk to do something different and do something more to get something different and to get something more? I know you felt that one because I did. And the fourth way to ask for help from a position of strength is to create a two-way street. Asking for help doesn't have to be one-sided. You're much more likely to ask for help when you need it if you know a peer may also look to you for guidance when they need it, which is what I shared with you earlier. When I learned to ask for help and made it clear that I was open to also being helpful when they needed me, then it was a game changer. I felt better. They felt better. It was an exchange because I do believe in reciprocal relationships. And it's crazy because sometimes, myself included, you have those friends in your life who won't even allow you to help them. You may have the tools for what they need. You may be available to go with them someplace and they just won't ask. And what you don't always realize is they're probably suffering inside because they don't know how to. So, don't give up. Don't give in. But go and ask for help. And sometimes just show up because you know they need it. And when you do that, you relieve them. And then they'll probably open up and be like, oh my God, I'm so glad you're here. I needed help. But they won't ask for it. So sometimes it's not just about asking for help. Sometimes it's also about just being there and being helpful, whether somebody asks or not.
We'll be back with more Super Power Her with your host, Deya Direct.
Have you ever been in a relationship, personally or professionally, that has failed? And it made you feel lost and discouraged? Well, what if I told you that you can literally leverage every single painful situation and make your pain pay you back? After all, it cost you something. Just like with a bank account, you want to get some interest off of everything that you've been through. All the tears, all the time, all the effort. Make it pay you back. Use it. Leverage it. Check out my Amazon #1 bestseller, Failure is Fuel, and experience how my testimony can fuel your life to the next level.
When we come back, we'll discuss the power of help with two women who led the way by approaching it from a position of power at work.
We're back where Superfly women testify. It's the Super Power Her podcast with your host, Deya Direct.
Dang, girl, that's messed up.
Who is she?
It's Deya Direct.
Welcome to the Deya Gets Direct segment, where we have fun power combos with guests that help us ignite our insight. Listen to this. Hey, you guys, it's Deya Direct. Got some new girlfriends I want to talk to, and they'll be your girlfriends before it's all said and done. But we're talking about something that is like taboo, but it shouldn't be, which is the power of asking for help. Like, why is that so hard? Why do I break out in a complete sweat, get nervous, heart palpitations, all of a sudden my esteem just, goes all over the place just at the thought, not even the ask. Just at the thought of needing to ask someone for help. So I started doing some research, and I realized that people who are like uber successful, they get it. Like, they know how to ask for help. They appreciate people that are actually smarter than them. I saw something in Success Magazine recently that said relying on others actually helps us to better reach our goals. So I'm talking with these two powerhouses from Providence St. Joseph Health. They get it. They get the need for help so much so that they created their own organization within an organization so that women could ask for help. And before I introduce them, another really good fun fact is I just saw something, and I know it's true because I experienced it, which is it says that people are more likely to stay at their jobs longer if they have a best friend, right? And so how powerful is that? And think about it. We spend most of our time at work anyway, so you need friends at work that you actually like, because I have to be with you more than I can even be with my family. You all understand how important it is to have support and help at work, and especially if you're a caregiver, right? Everyone cares for, there are superwomen in their life. You caring for all these other people, but who cares for you? What did you start, first of all, and why did you start it? We're really excited because Whitney Hagerson is the Director of Strategic Initiatives for Population Health, and Cara Santucci, who is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Providence St. Joseph Health. Ladies.
Yeah, so thanks, Deya. We're excited to be on. So the Women's Caregiver Resource Group is a caregiver resource group, and caregivers are what we call our employees. It is a resource group for the women at Providence St. Joseph Health. And what we really try to do is create a connected and empowered community of women through initiatives like mentorship and trainings and lunch and learns and partnering with HR and equitable work practices. And I think we got a lot of the inspiration through just kind of some situations that we kind of looked into coming to Providence a few years ago. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I think Kara and I worked on the same team right when we first got here, and we joke about it now that I courted her for so long, wanting her to be my best friend at work. And once we kind of hit it off, we talked a lot about the fact that we're just so fortunate to have a really good group of girlfriends here at Providence St. Joseph Health, and how much that has impacted, our resiliency when you have hard days. And so we were like, how do you scale something like this? How do you create a forum to make sure other women feel comfortable reaching out and connecting? And how do we involve our leaders in the conversation? So Kara and I have been super fortunate to have a number of female leaders at Providence St. Joseph Health that have interacted with us and supported us and coached us. And so really pulling them in right off the bat to kind of do the same for others.
Well, I want to know, how are you even courageous enough to reach out to her? Because we were kind of joking before we got started, which is, when you get older, somehow we get so much in our head that, when I was younger, I would just go up to somebody, talk to them, and we would be friends. Now that we're older, it's like, you're afraid of rejection more. You don't necessarily reach out to people. You don't want anybody to think you're, too hungry or thirsty for friends or whatever it is. What made you say, you know what? I think, there's something about her I like, and I'm going to be vulnerable and interested enough to say hi.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just kind of go out on a limb, right? You're like, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? She's not going to move desks. She sits next to me, kind of talking to her every day. And I think taking an interest in other women and taking an interest in your colleagues. What are they working on? What's their home life look like? And just kind of slowly breaking down the walls for communication. And then it just kind of clicks one day, and I think getting over that hump, getting over that nervousness to talk to the person on the spin bike next to you or whatever it may be, I mean, at the end of the day, what do you have to lose, right? I wouldn't be horrified if someone took interest in my life. So I need to remember that kind of going into approaching those relationships with others.
And that's one of the things that we're trying to achieve through the women's group is having a space where we open up that dialogue and realize there's so much power in just realizing we all feel like that. You know, there's women that walk into the room and they're making friends and they look super confident, and likely they're kind of second guessing themselves and it feels kind of awkward trying to make friends. And so just having that space where we can just have this kind of conversation, I think is really important.
You know, I think it's always hard too when you're the new girl at work and people already have established relationships because there's a trust factor there. A lot of times there's insecurity about, you know, does this person know more than I do? Are they gonna replace me? And sometimes that's not even the person or the other women at work. Sometimes it's management and the atmosphere that they set up, right? Yeah. Which does not feel safe, which is why I think what you all are doing over at Providence St. Joseph is so phenomenal, because that says there's a culture that allows and supports and believes that women should be supported in this way. And so, you know, even as we're having this conversation, I definitely want to invite folks to ask questions, to invite your friends. And, you know, if you have some questions you want to talk about, you know, stress, you know, particularly in the workplace and how that all manifests in your life. And we can be a part of helping to answer that question today. Just go ahead and type in your question and we'll kind of take it from there. Okay. So I'm really interested in what are some of the topics and issues that come up for people within the work group? What do you talk about when those things come up, and how do you resolve issues as they come up?
Yeah, so we started pretty informally with a lunch and learn. We had an exec that was willing to come talk about 10 things that she wished she knew when she was a younger female, kind of starting in her career, has just grown from there. We got a lot of feedback from our caregivers, which, as Kara had mentioned, is what we call our employees, about what they wanted to hear about. A lot of the topics that I think you probably talk about with your girlfriends over a glass of wine or coffee, right? They want to talk about work-life balance. They want to talk about, you know, how do you negotiate that next step in your career? What does that look like? How do you prioritize self-care, which is really challenging? So we started off just doing those lunch and learns. And I think this year, getting a little bit more formalized, going to focus in more on career and mentorship, again, based on feedback from the group and PSGH.
Can you tell me like one takeaway each? Was there one real significant aha moment or tidbit, fact or story that you've learned in the group that really helped you in your own life?
I think for me, this concept, and you alluded to it earlier, and I think it was in an HBR article a while back, and it said that employees are 7 times more likely to be engaged in their roles when they have a best friend at work. And I never really was able to articulate that. You know, I've had friends at work, and very much so when I came to Providence, and I found real friendships and real connections and real community. But I didn't really see the connection to that's why I feel empowered and that's why I stay. We spend 40 plus hours a week at work, because when you have that friend that you can go to when you're stressed out for support, or just bounce things off of, or just take a quick break and go have a coffee break together, it's game changing. And I think that allows, that community is what keeps me. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I realized, is being able to make that connection.
Yeah, I think the thing that's been most powerful to me is hearing stories from other female leaders at Providence and realizing that at one point they were in our shoes too, and navigating this awkward world of learning to prioritize. I think in the beginning of our careers, you raise your hand and you say yes, and you try and get the exposure to different leaders and different thought topics, but eventually you get to the point where you can't keep saying yes, or you're going to burn yourself out. And I think hearing from our leaders about the fact that it's okay to prioritize things that, you know, are impactful to the community and to the organization, but that also set your soul on fire, and starting to say no to things that don't do that, which is really hard. I don't think we talk about it a lot. Neither of us have mastered it, but I think hearing from other leaders that they've struggled with it, and tactically things they've done to try and find that balance, has been the most important takeaway for me.
I gotta tell you, so I've talked to Dr. Robin Henderson over there, who I just love. And when we've had conversations, she's been so transparent about some of her struggles. And because, you know, she's a psychologist, and you think, you know, people who are in certain professions aren't supposed to have certain issues.
sometimes they're held to unfair standards. And so when we're able to have these transparent conversations with leaders, people who have walked paths that we haven't walked yet, you realize that just because you're strong in one area of your life or because you know something intellectually or professionally, it doesn't mean that every other area of your life is together, or that emotionally you know how to navigate along the way, even within your own life, because your emotions are now involved versus what your brain, is telling you. And so I just recently did a self-care summit. And one of the things that I thought was super important, and I think I hear you guys saying too, is when you see people in positions of power, tell the truth and be vulnerable and say me too, a whole nother way to say me too. Totally. It literally de-stresses you because you realize the humanity of us all, and you realize you can still be successful even though you have these crazy feelings going on. To know that they were also unsure, or they had moments of weakness or whatever it is, it's like it just humanizes us all. And so more people should have these kinds of groups, but it also requires trust and support from management. Like, how would one put together this kind of group, and what would you even say to management to get it going?
From a really basic practical level, starting with a female leader that can be that champion. And for us, it's our executive sponsor, Deb Canales. And, she not only champions us as a group, she champions amongst her peers. And so I will say we've had no problem getting support. We have all of their support. Every time we go to them to come and do a lunch and learn, or invite them to come and do something with the group, they say yes every time, and they're happy to do it. And so for us, that's been pretty game changing. What would you say?
Yeah. And I think, as you think about administratively, right, everyone's doing this kind of off the side of their desks a little bit, but if it's a passion project, it doesn't feel like work, right? It doesn't feel like another thing that's on your to-do list. So I'd say pick something that you feel passionate about. You don't want it to feel like another checkbox. And, we started with lunch and learns because that was kind of a fun way for us to connect with our friends and connect with our peers. And so I think finding those things that you're really excited about, so it doesn't feel like a chore. And I think reiterating what Kara said, don't be afraid to ask. We have been so blessed to have so many leaders say, oh, absolutely, we are 100% behind you.
And not just our female leaders, our male leaders too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's such an integral part of this conversation. I think it's just kind of taking the first step and raising your hand.
We have a question from Catherine Summers, but I would just add to what you just said. Even if you are afraid, be afraid and do it anyway, right?
Yeah.
Feel it.
Catherine Summers says, what is a good way to talk to your supervisor about your workload without making it look like you're not trying hard enough, at your job? Sometimes the workload is just too heavy. It's overwhelming. How do you communicate that and not look like you're slacking?
Acknowledging that you're probably not the first person that's felt that. I mean, I think Kara and I have really leaned pretty heavily on our group of girlfriends as we've had to have conversations like that, or if we've had to have conversations about moving into next roles or starting families. And I think getting the advice from your peers about how they handled it and what they did that made them feel comfortable is really, really powerful. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a manual for how to make those crucial conversations any easier, but I think normalizing it and realizing that, you haven't been the first and there will be people that come after you, and being open enough to have the conversations with your peers about what worked and what didn't work.
That's really important, like you said, to normalize it.
We'll be back with more Super Power Her with your host, Deya Direct.
Working together in a supportive way and embracing the power of help is definitely something that we can all be more intentional about. So I hope you enjoyed that interview with Kara and Whitney from Providence St. Joseph, where their goal is to increase healthier populations while removing all health barriers through increased access to primary care, management, and education. To learn more and hear our full interview, go to psjhealth.org or log on to their Facebook page at Providence St. Joseph Health. Here's another thing to consider as you move forward in asking for help. Understand this: as we continue to journey in the name of help, be aware that emotions like fear and pride are often at the root of the problem. Self-worth issues
also prevent people from asking for help. Some people worry admitting their shortcomings will be such a blow to their self-esteem that they will crumble. They feel things like, I'll think less of myself for needing help. The problem didn't seem worth getting help for. I wouldn't know what sort of help is available. My problem is embarrassing. I don't like to talk about my feelings. Any of those sound like you? In closing, today I want you to find the courage to ask for help beyond how you feel. And yes, it does take courage. You may need to see a therapist, a life coach. You may need help financially. You may need help with a job. You may need help in your relationship. You may need to go see a marriage or relationship therapist. You may need help with your health. There are programs for people in case you don't have health insurance. If you're afraid to go get your breast checked, like I'm on my way to go get my breast checked right after I talk to you, and my girlfriends offered to come with me. Just knowing that somebody's willing to come with you, who's been there, amazing feeling. And I want to be that person for others. So I'm just telling you, if you're pretending like everything's together when you know it's not, you're not actually being mentally strong. Instead, you're just acting tough, ignoring your pain, masking your weakness, and suppressing your emotions will not make you any better. So remind yourself that asking for help means that you're strong because you're admitting that you don't have all the answers. And that's what smart people do. Remember how when we were in school, they would say, the smart ones, raise your hand, that you're not dumb if you raise your hand and ask a question? Well, the same concept applies here. And the best news is asking for help develops the mental muscle you need to become mentally stronger. And over time, it gets easier, and the support you gain, the better equipped you'll be to take on bigger challenges, to take your life and your love to the next level. I'm your girl, Deya Direct, and I'm also a social and emotional intelligence life coach. So if you need me, reach out to me at deyadirect.net, and we can do a call to talk about what you might be struggling with. Just like I can be there for you, sometimes I have to call somebody to be there for me too. And that's the way the circle of help goes. Love you, mean it. Share it with somebody who needs this message. Like us on iTunes and leave us a comment. We love to hear from you. For more information about what's going on with the podcast and our events, email me at info@deyadirect.net. That's info@deyadirect.net. And this has been the Super Power Podcast, where women of power and the men that love us testify.